beginning, there was me, Dr. Roger Gewald, with this edition of The Gospel According to Dr. Roger. Welcome to our show, where, as always, we give you the unvarnished truth about everything that's going on, all the news stories, everything coming out of the gobs of the big shots, the politicians, our so-called leaders around the world, and what's really happening. This is the only place from me and my guests, I promise you. There must be some others. Of course, there's some others, but this is the best place to find out what really is happening and what we are really being exposed to. Today, I have got a guest who's a very interesting man. Gawain Towler was Nigel Farage's right-hand comms man, communications, for a very long time. And he was the head of communications for UKIP and also the Reform Party until he unceremoniously departed recently and is now operating as a PR consultant. And the Reform Party is not quite the same sounding and looking and seeming without him. He's all over the place, and Reform is in a very unusual state at the moment. It's hard to figure out what's going on exactly, who's winning, who's losing. And so I want to explore that with him and find out for myself and for all of you, dear viewers, what in the world is actually happening and what is going to happen. So I'm going to bring Gawain in now, and we will get to hear what he has to say. Greetings, Gawain. How are you today?
Good morning. It is a fine one.
Excellent. I love your waistcoat and God Save the Queen behind you. That's excellent. Well done. Well done. If I may, I want to begin by asking you the obvious question. You were Nigel Farage's right-hand man for many, many years, and latterly.
Well, to describe his right-hand man is probably pushing it for the last 10, but I've been definitely involved in the system. Yes.
Okay. And you were a pretty important cog in the machine. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And you were the head of communications at Reform. What was that like, and how did it all come together when you first joined, and what made you stick with it for so long?
Well, I'm a cause loyalist. I famously when I left UKIP and then started with the Brexit Party a year or so later, it was pointed out that I had worked for, I think, 8 different UKIP leaders, 4 of whom were Nigel Farage. He would come in and out like the tide, and I'd still be there. No, my loyalty has always been to the cause rather than to individuals. I happen to think that I found working with Nigel very, very easy. And he also gave me an awfully long lead because he and I have always found the politics easy in the sense that 95 times out of 100, we would agree on points of policy. So being the press officer for the party, Nigel's always been a preternaturally busy man. He's always chasing around the place doing stuff. So one isn't always sort of sitting in his pocket and double checking that you're right. And is this okay?
Right.
So, but it got to the point where if an article was commissioned by him, I could write it and I'd send it to him, and he'd rarely edit more than a few words,
right?
Because the political sympathies were very, very close. And also, he's a very humane and liberal man in his person. And so people don't realize this. And I think the public demeanor and the public perception is he is a man who does not wear forgiveness next to his soul when it comes to differences and disagreements and mistakes and errors. That is not true. I've made plenty of errors over my time. Who hasn't? But to Farage, errors can cause two things. One, you can lose yourself, or two, you can learn.
Yes.
And learning has always been part of it. Making mistakes is either an opportunity to be fired or to learn. And I
Yes.
think historically, the party and the party under Farage has very much been preferred to do the learning thing.
Yeah.
Now, in the end, and there are plenty of past examples, discipline matters. Mistakes are okay, but discipline matters. If there's a mistake being made, it can be solved. But in the end, the team, the project, the cause is more important than any single individual.
Comes first. Well, I mean, those are very good lessons for any employment situation. And you were right in the middle of everything. So may I ask what actually happened that led to your recent rapid departure?
Nigel had given the new chairman a very simple instruction, a very simple brief. Get Reform UK ready for the 2029 election. Now, you've got to remember, on July the 4th, July the 5th, we're sitting there. We've just got 14%, 14.1%. We've just got 5 members elected. The whole system and we hadn't just thrown the kitchen sink at the last few weeks of the election, but we'd broken into next door, nicked their kitchen sink, chucked that, and gone down the street and found as many sinks we could find and chucked them as well. Now, after that, there is rebuilding. We had a gentle and mostly volunteer regional structure. There were 1 or 2 staffers who were paid in the regions, but very few. And the entire election campaign was based around the candidate. But on the day after the election, there are no candidates. And whilst they built up their local teams of volunteers and deliverers and things of this sort, there was no structure whatsoever. We didn't have branches and so on and so forth. Now, if you want to be seen to be a credible party for government in 5 years' time,
I'm going to interrupt because we don't have that much time. Gawain, what I'm asking is about your departure. I understand all of.
Well, the point is okay. Zia was given this task, and he wanted.
Zia is the new chairman. Yeah,
the new chairman. The chairman had been given a task. He wanted the system to be something that he was comfortable with working with, and I didn't fit in his vision of how the party goes forward.
Why is that?
That's fine, because I have my own views. I'm more of a buccaneer than a member of the Navy, because over the years that has been my role, and I have a different approach to that which he wanted, and that's fine. He's the boss. He gets to to choose.
What was that difference? I can't put my finger on why you wouldn't have embraced the things you just enumerated.
I do embrace them, but I don't fit comfortably within them.
Because I have a
different style. I don't have a style. I have a style that's been built up over years with personal relationships across the media, rather than constantly checking against a design as to what and how I should operate. And whilst it suits me, it doesn't suit the new system.
I understand.
And if the new system
I understand. You're an old pro, and Mr. Yusuf wanted somebody who he could manage a bit more.
Precisely. He wanted somebody, and he wanted a team that did as they were asked, and that's fair enough.
He could manage a bit more. Okay, fine. Let's move on.
Which is fair enough. It's just a different style.
Yeah, reform has definitely had its share of challenges lately. Do you think the party can overcome all this internal internecine drama and come together for the next election? And what do you think exactly, precisely, the way needs to happen to get things back on track?
I think the first question, absolutely, of course. If you're expanding rapidly, if you're doing things of that sort, if you're going from, as I describe it, a corner shop to Morrison's, you need different systems, you need different process, and in that way, decent people, sadly, will have their corns trodden on. There are going to be casualties, people who are good. I mean, there was Zia very early on talked about the difference between we had a hugely loyal but not particularly competent team, and he's trying to balance those two into both loyal and
Right.
competent. So
Right. Okay.
he was trying to bring in people like that. So do I
Okay.
think it'll work? Yes. Are there troubles? Yes. Are people going to have their noses put out of joint? Yes. That's the nature of growth. And
Sure.
anybody who thinks it's going to be a primrose path from A to B has got another thing coming. It's just not going to work. What do
Okay.
they have to do? I do think they have to listen a bit more. I do think the feedback loop to me needs to improve. I do think that the democratization of the party has to be not only heard but seen. I believe that will be the case, though in the context of 1,600 council candidates, X many mayoralties, and all the rest of it, that's very hard to do when you're
Yeah.
doing everything at once.
Yeah.
But I do that feedback loop needs to be improved without a shadow
Okay.
of doubt.
Do you think, with everything going on, it's time for the leadership to change? And if so, who do you think could step up and help bring the party? What about all this going on with Rupert
Honestly,
Lowe and Ben Habib and Musk and Trump? What is all that all about?
Musk is irrelevant, completely irrelevant. He's done a very good job by bringing the rape gangs back into public domain and public vision in this country. Absolutely. But beyond that, he's pretty irrelevant. When it comes to, it's mad. People asking those questions, and in the biosphere, the right of centre biosphere, that's mostly reform adjacent rather than reform. In that biosphere, there's got to be change. Hold on. So you have a party that's gone from no branches to 450. It's gone from no councillors to about 100. It's gone from 40,000 members to 220,000 members. It's gone from 14% of the polls to mid-20s in the polls. And this is the point. You turn around and say, well, this leadership's rubbish, isn't it? It's doing nothing. No, that's absurd.
Right.
Absolutely absurd. When you need to demand change when everything essentially has been going very well. Now there are hiccups, there are problems as displayed, and a no growth curve is a straight line. It's like it does
do you,
this.
do you think that
The
Zia
growth is there,
Yusuf?
but it does this.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut in. It's just our time is limited, and I want to get a bunch of questions in. Do you think that Zia Yusuf, the current chairman, based on your experience, is the right person to guide reform through these tough times?
I think Zia is very good at certain things and perhaps not so good at other things. He's
Sure,
excellent at systems. He's excellent at design. He's excellent at creation
but
of
is
that
he the
sort of
right?
thing.
Is he the
He's
right
also a
person?
very good performer. He's also a very good performer in the media, in his public
So
speeches, all the rest of it. There's a lot of.
is he the right person to guide reform through these very difficult times?
I think you need a broader team. I think he is good in very good in aspects of his role, not so good in others.
Okay.
But I think there's an awful lot of pressure on one man's head, and as the team expands, you'll see an improvement of that.
Very good politician's
Personally,
answer. Thank you. What's been the biggest mistake or missed opportunity for Reform UK so far? How could things have been done differently?
I think that there needs to be the ability to breathe. When something happens, there needs to be a recognition. You don't have to act instantly. And at times, I think there has been a level of precipitation that isn't necessary.
Too many knee-jerk reactions.
Well, the response under pressure, I think sometimes you have to just sort of breathe. Everything doesn't have to be done at once. You don't have to react so quickly to situations.
Right.
There are things you need to do properly and in a timely fashion. But sometimes I feel because the team is so small and is highly pressured, sometimes the ability to take a helicopter, rise above it, look down and go, all right, chill.
Yeah.
Most things, as they say, very few things matter, and very, very few things matter very much.
If somebody was stepping into a comms role, a communications role at Reform right now, what advice would you give them, knowing everything you've learned up until today?
My basic advice, it's always been the same. 3 things. 1, never lie. 2, when somebody phones and says you'll get back to them, you do. You just respond. It's called good manners, and that builds a great deal of it builds trust
Sure.
between yourself and your interlocutors in the media.
Sure.
So those two are the most important.
And the third?
Now, when I say never lie, it's up to the journalist to ask the right question. You don't have to give them everything you've got, but what you do give them and demonstratory. The reason for that is simple. One, it's the right thing to do, and two, you'll get caught in the end. And if you get away with it a couple of times, you then get a false sense of security that you'll always get away with it, and in the end, it'll come to bite you hard.
What's the third, Gawain?
The third point is that if you brief in an underhand fashion against somebody, you need to speak to. If you've got an issue, you do it publicly. If you brief in an underhand way, then the journalist you're briefing start to regard you as somebody untrustworthy. And media relations is all about trust. If you've got a problem with somebody or something, you say it, you put your name to it. If you do it if you underbrief and back brief, you might get your story in there, you might get your digs out there or whatever, but the journalist you're talking to knows that you're not somebody to be trusted.
Okay, that's a very fair point. Last question. Do you think things are about to change big time? Do you think reform could actually end up in government?
Yes, it absolutely could. I wouldn't. Nothing is certain in this naughty world, of course, and we're 4 years away, and there's all sorts of opportunities to make an absolute stramash of things. But one that looks at our friends on the government benches, we look at our friends on the opposition benches, and you go, do you really think this lot are going to take this country forward? Do you think the opposition is any capable of doing so? We're told to think about the professionals. You lot are a bunch of amateurs. Reform, bunch of amateurs. What do they know? And then you look at the professionals. You have Angela Rayner going on the box and saying, there's a housing crisis. So the 1.5 million are going to go to migrants. Oh, no, there's no housing crisis. Well, make your pick. There is one, there isn't one. When you've got Rachel from Accounts producing a spring statement that basically promises to put an extra 500 quid in your pocket, when you know that on the fuel bills, we were promised 300 quid reduction, we got 300 quid increase. The perception is that the pretense of this word growth, the only growth is the growth of fear and the growth of lack of confidence in the country. You've got businesses closing by the hundreds of thousands, and that's before the budget stuff comes in. Looking at the so-called professionals, we cannot do any worse.
Right.
We can't, because the sort of people who are standing for us, the sort of people who are putting themselves forward, are people who have achieved, who have succeeded. They may not have succeeded in the political sphere, but they've succeeded in their own lives in a vastly diverse range of occupations and lifestyles.
Talking about those people, what about...
The whipping will be nightmarish. The whipping will be an absolute nightmare because all these people are people who are achievers.
So what about Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib?
I think that has passed. I think Rupert may well make a very effective independent MP, and I think that suits him more than being part of the team. I just do. There are things that have happened over the years. As I say, Farage forgives. He's forgiven quite a few times in the case of Rupert, and this was the final straw. And what is very interesting about all this case, and one thing that's all been missed completely, what's happened to the two women? Does anybody give a damn? Really?
Yeah.
There has been nothing said. These two women are being used as weapons by both sides, and nobody seems to care about them.
No.
The party reportedly does, which is why it's launched an investigation. But I see nobody reaching out. I don't see them being looked after.
No.
And Rupert claims the opposite. And again, we've not bullied them. Okay, you haven't bullied. You say you haven't bullied them. But look at the way they've been just dragged over the coals by both sides. I think there's something missing there.
Okay. That's a good point.
So in this case, that's what I'm concerned about. the big boys can look after themselves. They're big beasts. They've got thick skins. It's their game. But these were just members of staff who may or may not have failed in their duties and job, but they certainly have been used as weapons in a war that is not theirs.
Gawain, thank you very much. I'm sorry we haven't got more time, but we're definitely going to have you back. Thank you very much for what was a brilliant contribution. It certainly gave me focus on a lot of questions I had. Have a great trip to Washington next week, Washington, D.C. I'm sure you'll dazzle them all. And we'll see you back here on the Gospel According to Dr. Roger, very soon. Thank you.
And tomorrow I'm off to the great rally in Birmingham to see how that goes. It should be fun.
Absolutely.